Arsenal 2, Wolves 0, and Arsenal very much go and get the job done. We're at the stage in the season where the performance doesn't matter. Everybody's knackered. Manchester City, Chelsea probably deserved to beat them earlier today, but Manchester City, they got the job done. They're exhausted. Arsenal played less than 72 hours ago against Bayern Munich. They're absolutely exhausted. I'm surprised Saka still has legs at this rate with how much he's running. And I think maybe Mikel Arteta's not being able to rotate as much as other managers doesn't help. But this was one of those games where Arsenal just needed to win. City, Liverpool, Arsenal, I don't think any of them are really going to be at their best in this final stretch of the season. It's a test of mentality, having the quality to get it over the line. And against the Wolves side, which, yes, had injuries, away to Wolves is always a difficult game. Many people have struggled away at Wolves. We've seen them take points off title-winning City side in the past. Arsenal went and got the job done. It wasn't about being pretty. It wasn't about playing amazing football. It's about scoring the goals, winning 2-0, getting the job done. And obviously a brilliant finish from Trossard does that. Martin Odegaard comes up with the second right at the end, and what a finish from Odegaard. But you can see that Arsenal were knackered and they got the 3 points. They did the job. They are now top of the league. And yes, Manchester City have a game in hand, but there's always that psychology of sometimes when you have the points on the board rather than the game in hand, sometimes you've got the advantage because there's no guarantee Man City win that game in hand. They probably will, but I don't think Manchester City have looked very good for a lot of their games, but they've just had the quality to get it over the line, and they're not as good this season. And while they've got that mental and that quality to get it over the line, I think City will drop points between now and the end of the season. I really think they will. So if Arsenal win all their remaining games, I think Arsenal can win the league. And today it was about winning the game. That is what they did. City now psychologically know they have to win. They aren't as good this season. Tottenham's always been a bogey team for Manchester City. Tottenham might do Arsenal a favour. You never know. But I want to talk about Raya. I want to talk about Trossard. I want to talk about Rice. I want to talk about Arsenal in general. I also do want to talk about Arteta, and because he doesn't really rotate a lot. And I do think you've got Fabio Vieira that I've barely seen kick a ball. We've got Arsenal have got Smith Rowe again, who no one's seen barely seen kick a ball this season. Obviously, he's had injuries. And I'm surprised that they don't really get a run in. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about David Raya. I want to give the goalkeeper credit because I think when you praise Arsenal this season, it's been all about the defence. And I guess Raya's not had loads to do because the defence has been good, least shots conceded, all of that. And then Odegaard and Saka gets his praise from time to time, and Havertz has had his praise from time to time. But I mean, Raya's very good. And I think Raya was one where he had 1 or 2 iffy games at the start of the season, and idiots would just write him off because I feel like with goalkeepers, people, particularly rivals, they will see 1 or 2 mistakes, put this narrative in that Raya's bad. Raya's been a good keeper for Arsenal all season. He's better than Ramsdale, was a very good keeper, and he's a good shot stopper. He's made a few good saves today, but what Raya adds is actually he's very good for Arsenal and build up, very good on the ball, can be an outlet in terms of helping progress play on the ball. But today he did his job. Wolves are a difficult side. Wolves, yes, they've had injuries, but they've got some good players. That João Gomez has been linked to United. I think he's been linked to Arsenal as well. He looks like a very good player. And Wolves, they are, I think, 10th or 11th. They were up there. They've just had injuries. They're same amount of points as Chelsea at one point, but Chelsea have overtaken them. And Raya had a good game. And I think Raya's been pretty good for Arsenal this season. I think he's had a good season, but he's one that doesn't get spoken about enough. Now, Arsenal, they needed a breakthrough. The first half from Arsenal, they looked a bit drained. They didn't quite look at it. I mean, the finishing. I look at Arsenal. They need a left back. They need a left centre mid that is someone that is very technically good in possession, comfortable on the ball, have the back to goal, press resistant. They need like a Frankie de Jong-esque player. They need a left back and they need a striker. I think Kai Havertz is someone that can excel as an 8 and excel as a striker, but he's never going to be a world-class striker and he's never going to be a world-class 8, if that makes sense. Kai Havertz is someone that's a really good outlet in your squad because if there's injuries, he can play as an 8, he can play as a 9, and he can do a good job there. But you can do better. And Kai Havertz is 24, he's a good player, he's been a good outlet to Arsenal. But the way I see it is Partey's been injured all season, pretty much Smith Rowe's been injured all season, and Jesus has had lots of injuries. So having Havertz has been a good signing for Arsenal because he's been able to play as a 9, particularly in big games, do a really good job. He's been able to come in midfield and do a decent job. While we know Arsenal aren't as good on the ball with Havertz in midfield, he's very good at winning the balls in the air and sort of allowing them to evade the man-to-man press. He has his uses off the ball. I think Havertz is a good player, and I think what Arsenal need is a top-class left centre mid and a top-class number 9. And if they get injured, you've got Havertz to play that. And that's how you achieve good squad depth. You look at Manchester City, they've got Julian Alvarez, but and Erling Haaland. If they can choose one or the other, there's 2 really good options. Erling Haaland, while he's been a bit poor lately, there's no doubt in my mind Erling Haaland is a world-class striker despite him being poor lately. but it's fine. You can play Julian Alvarez there. And I think, you know, Kai Havertz can be that sort of Julian Alvarez type player that can play striker. But I do think with the amount of chances Arsenal miss in their finishing, they definitely need a striker, because I think they've got a good defence. It's a solid defence. Declan Rice is obviously a monster. I think Odegaard's a good player, but today wasn't great, but he still got his goal. And I saw a lot of Arsenal fans saying Odegaard off, Odegaard off. He got his goal, finished it 2-0. He's got those qualities in him, Odegaard. He's one of those players that Arteta doesn't take off, because even if it's a bad game, he can do that one pass that opens up a defence, gets an assist, or that one brilliant shot. Odegaard, even when he doesn't have games, he has those moments of magic. But they need that left centre mid, they need that left back, they need that striker. I think Victor Gyökeres would be great. I think Alexander Isak would be brilliant for Arsenal as well. Frankie de Jong would be amazing, but I don't think they're going to get Frankie de Jong. I think Kobbie Mainoo, weirdly, and I'm not saying this because I'm a United fan, would suit Arsenal. But one player that's been very good for Arsenal, and the word I would use for him is reliable, is Trossard. Trossard's ball striking is a different level, and I think Arsenal was struggling and running out of ideas a little bit to break down, I was about to say Brentford Wolves at the time. Credit to Wolves. Wolves made it really, really difficult for Arsenal. But Trossard is that guy where in those central areas, bosh. He reminds me of Diogo Jota. He's not one of those guys that's really fast and is an elite ball carrier. He's someone that's very good in the half spaces, very good in the central spaces and tight areas. He can keep the ball, keep touches, and then what he can do is he can manipulate the defender to go that way and make the defender go that way, which creates a little bit of space for him to get that shot off. And when he gets that shot off, bosh. I mean, what a finish from Trossard, because had Trossard not scored that, Arsenal right until that very end were relying on Odegaard to do something and could have maybe been 0-0. Like, Wolves very well disciplined. And I think with someone like Leandro Trossard, because he's so good in central areas, he's very good against low blocks. I think this season Arsenal have been defensively great, but they've struggled a little bit against low blocks. I think, you know, if you look at the start of the season, Arsenal were ranked 13th for goals scored, I think, after the first 12, 13 games. And then they went on that brilliant run and just scored a load of goals and got that amazing goal difference. But we know that Arsenal have had their slight struggles, we'll say, in terms of scoring goals. At points earlier in the season, I remember Arsenal last season, they came out so fast, so free-flowing, and then the beginning of this season, they weren't as fast and free-flowing, and they just looked a little bit like they were struggling to break down low blocks more, because teams were playing a lot deeper against Arsenal, because they realised the quality they had and were defending more against Arsenal. And then they went on that brilliant run where they just were like absolutely unstoppable. And I think now that they've ran out of that energy a little bit, it's again being a bit more difficult. But Trossard's that kind of player when you know you're playing up against a low block. He's very good in those central areas because he can keep the ball, he can hold up the ball decently well, but he can rotate from out wide centrally, he can drop deeper. But you give him a ball, bosh. If he scored a lot of his goals, he's very clinical. And sometimes when you're creating chances or you are struggling to break down that low block, you need someone that can finish like Trossard, and I think he does well. And I sometimes think that him and Jesus have a good dynamic. I think that Jesus, while he's not a clinical finisher, does add decent stuff off the ball. I want to talk a little bit about Bukayo Saka, and I saw someone say something about Bukayo Saka which stood out to me, and he said that thing about Bukayo Saka is he needs other players to create space for him, and I agree with that. Now, Saka, you know, people on Twitter will say that Saka's rubbish because he's had a few iffy games, but I think Saka's ran to the ground, and this used to happen with Rashford, and now, I'll be honest, as a Manchester United fan, Rashford has been dreadful this season, but Rashford had, I remember, a really good season. He scored like 20 goals, and then like the last 5 or 6, 7 games of the season, he just was off it and he was just bad. Same with Bruno. I remember Rashford and Bruno under Ollie had really, like, first 6 months of the season were unbelievable. Last 3 months were shocking, and everyone was going Rashford's shite, Bruno's shite. Same people on Twitter be saying Odegaard's shite, Saka's shite. But you know Odegaard's quality, you know Saka's quality. Not their best game today, but they're completely exhausted. And then the environment towards the end of the season of we've just got to find a win doesn't always make them thrive. Now, I'm not comparing Saka to Rashford. I'm not comparing Bruno to Odegaard, you know, to anyone. Rashford's been shocking this season. But I think Saka isn't a bad player, and we know he's an absolutely brilliant player. And I think people are loving that he's had a couple of games where he's not been as good. And, and yeah, the point I was wanting to make is I've just seen a lot of Saka slander lately, a lot of Saka slander. But this season he has been really good for Arsenal. But I think Arsenal over-rely on him. Arteta can't take him off. Arteta can't rest him. He has been Arsenal's best attacker. And I think that is almost caused him to be this guy that now Arsenal are over-reliant on. And they definitely need like a Nico Williams, some genuinely good competition for Saka, and someone they can take him off for. You know, Grealish can come off for Doku. Manchester City had many options on the wings. Arsenal, you know, they've got Trossard, Martinelli, Saka. Obviously, there is Nelson as well, but Arteta doesn't like to rotate. And I think with Saka, he's exhausted. I also think with Saka, he's a runner, he's a dribbler, he's a playmaker. I think he can look quite good in central areas. But I think he needs people in midfield to potentially attack that take the markers away from him. I saw someone say this, take the markers away from him and unlock that space for Saka. And maybe that's something that Mikel Arteta will spot on next season. But people are double marking Saka now because they know he's Arsenal's biggest threat, and maybe that's what they need to do. I do apologise for lag at the end of this recording, but please do hit that like button. Of course, subscribe down below if you're new. Let me know your thoughts. Bye.